U.S. government announces a major effort to cut emissions from heavy industries. We'll have more on the plan officials are calling the single largest industrial decarbonization investment in American history. Plus, Citigroup is getting candid about their energy clients' plans to reach net zero. Could the recent disclosure put a dent in the bank's plans to reduce emissions from their lending portfolios? We have the latest. And a pungent-smelling plant is causing a stink at a national monument in Arizona. What park officials say they're doing to keep visitors away from the odor. Hello and welcome to EarthX News, where we focus on sustainability, conservation, and the environment. I'm Christina Thompson. Let's get into some of the biggest headlines facing our planet. The U.S. government unveiled a groundbreaking $6 billion plan to fight industrial carbon. The U.S. Energy Department says the federal funds will be used to subsidize 33 projects across 20 states to cut emissions from heavy industries, including metals, chemicals, and cement. Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm said emissions from the industrial sector make up about a third of the country's carbon emissions, and the projects are expected to eliminate 14 million metric tons of pollution each year. That's equivalent to taking about 3 million gas-powered vehicles off the road. Granholm called it the single largest industrial decarbonization investment in American history. It looks like California is falling short on meeting its emissions targets. According to the state's Green Innovative Index, California will need to nearly triple its efforts to reduce greenhouse gases if it plans on hitting its environmental targets over the next 6 years. And according to state data, California's emissions of carbon dioxide, methane, and other greenhouse gases increased by 3.4% in 2021, moving the state further away from its emission reduction targets. To meet its goals, the Golden State would need to cut all of its greenhouse gases by nearly 4.5% annually through 2030, a much faster pace than what has been previously achieved historically. Major emitters like power plants and cement facilities are proving the most challenging to change, with electricity generation being responsible for a significant emissions increase in 2021. One major U.S. bank makes a shocking admission about some of its energy clients. Citigroup revealed in their latest climate report that almost half of the energy companies it lends to lack a clear plan to achieve net zero emissions. The data says 42% of its energy clients did not have a transition strategy for greenhouse gas emissions across their supply chain, while 29% of energy clients didn't have a clear plan of action in place to even make their high-level transition goals happen. Citi's energy sector is mostly related to oil and gas production, but it also includes bioenergy, carbon capture, hydrogen, and renewable energy companies, among others. The data also found only 8% of Citi's clients in the upstream and downstream energy sector are deemed by the bank as having strong transition plans. Despite these shocking claims, the bank reported a better transition alignment for its power sector clients, which are comprised of power generation companies, utilities, and others in the electricity sector, like battery, carbon capture, utilization and sequestration, hydrogen fuel cell, nuclear, and solar companies. Citi reported 59% as having a strong transition plan alignment to target emissions reductions and lower carbon generation. The report comes as many major banks, including Citigroup, have committed to reducing emissions from their lending portfolios. However, industry analysts say Citigroup's recent disclosure highlights a pretty big gap in the readiness of key sectors to make the switch to low-carbon business models. A recent study shows that sinking coastal lands will make the flooding from sea level rise even worse in numerous cities by the year 2050. The report, published in the science journal Nature, analyzed how the sinking of shoreline terrain and rising sea levels could produce possible flooding risks in 32 cities located along the Atlantic, Pacific, and Gulf coasts. Using satellite data, sea level rise projections, and tidal charts, the study found that out of the 32 coastal cities examined, 24 are sinking faster than the global sea levels are rising. Researchers say the study's findings could be staggering, with an estimated 500,000 plus people living in these regions, and the potential for 1 in every 35 private properties to face damages from flooding. A recent study paints a grim picture for the future of Arctic sea ice. According to research published in the geoscience journal Nature Reviews Earth and Environment, the region may start to see its first ice-free days before the end of the decade, or sometime in the 2030s because of warming temperatures. That's about 10 years earlier than previous projections. The study's lead author warned that the lack of ice would, quote, transform the Arctic into a completely different environment, from a white summer Arctic to a blue Arctic. According to the report, the loss of sea ice would contribute to larger wave heights, greater coastal erosion in the region, and would also threaten the survival of ice-dependent animals like polar bears, walruses, and seals. Scientists consider the loss of Arctic sea ice as a graphic measure of a warming climate. But despite the findings, the author did offer some hope, saying in part, quote, even if we melt all the Arctic sea ice, if we can then figure out how to take CO2 back out of the atmosphere in the future to reverse warming, sea ice will come back within a decade. An invasive plant caused quite a stink at a national park in Arizona. Staffers at the Casa Grande Ruins National Monument recently announced they had to temporarily close their picnic area because of the presence of a harmful weed called the globe chamomile. The plant is also called stinknet, and if you haven't smelled it, those of you who have say it smells like turpentine when it's crushed. It can even cause breathing problems or allergic reactions. Plant experts at the University of Arizona say the invasive species is native to South Africa and has spread across desert states since the late 1990s. Arizona State Parks and Trails warns the plant, with its bright yellow blossoms and narrow green stems, can displace native vegetation, change local ecosystems, and become a wildfire hazard during the summer months. Monument officials say a team is working on a solution that will get that picnic area reopened as soon as possible, but they said it might take until May. Turning now to international news, a key part of the European Union's climate agenda appears to be stuck in a holding pattern and potentially shelved indefinitely. Alex Salvi has that story.
An ambitious climate deal proposed by the European Union is on the brink of collapse, as farmers from across the continent object to what they say are additional and burdensome requirements. The 27-nation bloc is indefinitely postponing the Nature Restoration Act that sought to make Europe the first carbon-neutral continent by the year 2050. The delay is the latest concession, responding to concerns by citizens in the agriculture industry exerting their political influence in Brussels.
We have to be realistic, and we have to keep in mind all these sectors and all the actors who have to help us to reach our objectives.
Hungary is one of the countries objecting to the bill, following weeks of relentless protests by farmers who argue that its enactment would be yet another policy that drives them to the brink of bankruptcy. Across the continent, those in the agriculture industry are taking to the streets to make the case that food security is more important than ever amid Russia's invasion of Ukraine. They argue the demonstrations are a long time coming, and the latest effort by the EU would have been one step that they couldn't come back from.
We are here again in Brussels today as farmers because the European Union is not listening to our demands. Our demands is for fair revenue. We don't make a living out of our work. We produce the food and we don't make a living.
Farmers are slowly seeing their demands met, with politicians in Brussels watering down their initial bill to loosen regulations on their work. Proponents of the bill are hoping to strike a deal before the European Parliament elections this June, as right-wing parties continue to make headway in the polls and would likely use their power, if elected, to sink the bill and reverse other climate measures and sacrifice Europe's goal of being a leader on environmental policy. For EarthX, I'm Alex Salvi.
Alex Salvi, thank you. An oil-producing region in Nigeria is eyeing carbon deals from mangroves. The Niger Delta granted a UK-based company a 30-year lease agreement to generate carbon credits by restoring the coastal shrubbery and seagrass beds. The project developer says the effort could potentially store more than 5 million tons of carbon annually, which would prevent deforestation of 250,000 square units of land and replant 20,000 hectares. Major oil companies like Royal Dutch, Shell, Chevron, Total Energies, and ExxonMobil have been blamed for polluting the Delta state, which analysts say has led to significant mangrove loss. But now these companies could become buyers of these carbon offsets. Critics argue polluters should directly clean up their mess rather than rely on offset projects. Global sea surface temperatures have reached a record high. According to the latest report from the European Union's climate change agency, Copernicus, as February ended, the average daily sea surface temperature hit just over 21 degrees Celsius. That's up almost 1 degree from the previous record set last August. The latest data comes as the shortest month of the year was also declared the warmest on record, according to the International Climate Agency. The environmental organization revealed the average air temperature was more than 13 degrees Celsius. That's 0.12 degrees higher compared to the record set in February of 2016. According to Copernicus, the 1.56 average rise in temperature for the past 12 months shows the world is already breaching its attempt to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial climate levels. A once endangered fish is making a big comeback in British waters. Scientists say thousands of bluefin tuna have returned to the waters off the coast of southwest England since 2014, after almost being wiped out due to overfishing in the 1960s. Researchers are describing the resurgence as remarkable, but are cautiously celebrating the tuna's comeback because, according to several media reports, no one is really sure why they are back in such great numbers. Details of the bluefin tuna's return in England comes as media outlets report populations of the big fish are also recovering in the Mediterranean, where the vast majority are caught. According to government regulations, catching bluefins is outlawed in the UK. However, sport fisheries have obtained licenses to tag and release them as part of a study aiming to better understand why the creatures have returned to England's shores. Coming up, researchers are exploring a new form of sustainable farming, or should I say farm to table. Stay tuned, we'll have more on that story just ahead. Natural versus lab-grown diamonds. A recent report takes a look at both sides of the debate over which is better for the planet. According to the International Gem Society, the production of one polished carat of lab-grown diamond releases 3 times as many greenhouse gases compared to gems extracted from the earth. On the other hand, another study says the water used during the mining of natural diamonds may irreversibly damage water ecosystems and destroy land-based wildlife. But the study also suggested if the water is recycled, the environmental footprint can shrink also. The study added open pit mining may also produce hazardous and sometimes carcinogenic dust and gas that can be harmful to animals and mine workers. Some of the equipment used may also emit greenhouse gases. The author of the report on mining practices says on the environmental side, lab-grown diamonds are winning. Scientists are exploring what sources of meat could serve as more sustainable alternatives to beef, pork, and chicken. And according to a recent study, python farming could be the answer. The latest research suggests the scaly reptiles may offer a way to produce a source of protein with a relatively small environmental footprint. So could eating snake be what's for dinner in the future? Joining us now to discuss is Dr. Patrick Ost, Director of the African Institute of Applied Herpetology. Thank you for coming on. So eating pythons, is it really more sustainable than something like chicken?
Yeah, apparently so. Certainly according to our research, it seems like their food conversion efficiencies and particularly their protein conversion efficiencies are far more efficient than similar sized, conventional livestock species like chickens and pigs.
Well, in recent years, we've seen the supply chain get a little bit out of whack from here or there. Do pythons fare well with supply chains being impacted by something like extreme weather?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was one of the other interesting things that came out of our study. And that is the ability for these animals not only to live and grow off very little food, but also to survive extremely long periods of time with no food at all and without losing much body mass at all. In fact, they're very, very good at shutting down their physiology, their biology, and surviving for up to a year, literally with no food and very little water. And of course, these are traits that one looks for when you're trying to find livestock species that can cope with an increasing frequency of extreme weather. of extreme weather events, droughts, so on and so forth.
Is anyone farming pythons in the world right now?
Yeah, absolutely. It's certainly not very common, and certainly not in the West. But in Southeast Asia, there are a lot of farmers that have now turned to python farming, partly because they have this competitive edge in very challenging landscapes. And when we talk about extreme weather events, it's not so much a case of extreme weather events in Southeast Asia, although they do play a part, but it's actually it's increasing frequency of pandemics, particularly swine and bird flu, that are wreaking havoc in the poultry and pork industries. And so a lot of these farmers have thrown in the towel, and they've now opted to farm pythons.
Hypothetically, say we all just start eating snakes for dinner now. How would it help the environment?
It's a fairly long list, to be brutally honest with you, but I think, first and foremost, it's just we need far less resources to grow that protein that we require. Of course, then there's other advantages like their ability to survive, to tolerate extreme weather events, shutdowns in supply chains, to act as a biological barrier to zoonotic diseases. They also have these other attributes like the ability to be farmed on the vertical plane because they're partially arboreal. They live in trees and underground. Farmers have realized that unlike chickens and pigs, which effectively you have to farm on a two-dimensional plane, with pythons, they can move up and down. So you can farm them in very small areas.
How might a snake even be prepared for the table?
Lots of different ways. I mean, it's a culinary delicacy throughout much of Asia. And, with that, it can be cooked and prepared in any number of ways and spiced up in any number of ways.
Listen, I haven't had python yet, but I have actually tried rattlesnake in Arizona. And I did think that it tasted a little bit like chicken. If no one had told me it was snake, I wouldn't have known. Do you think that it might start to become more acceptable in the West to eat snakes?
Yeah, I think so. I think, certainly when looking for those competitive advantages, the other thing they offer is a nice big white juicy fillet, boneless fillet. But certainly when it comes to the culinary aspect, I think they lend themselves to a lot of Western cuisine.
Dr. Patrick Ost, thank you. I'm sure a lot of foodies will enjoy this conversation.
Thank you very much for having me.
Coming up, a castle in Switzerland is getting a makeover. Stay tuned. We'll have more on that story just ahead on EarthX News. A 17th century castle in Switzerland was transformed into the world's first water library. Sarah Williamson has more.
It aims to inspire. The world's first water library, inviting people to think about water as our most precious resource. Held in a 17th century castle on the River Rhine in Switzerland, the library aims to become a repository for the best evidence-based information to be made free for all.
Our World Water Library wants to be a place where people meet, where they can discuss, where they can learn and exchange, and create solutions to address the challenges related to water.
With drought making water scarce in many regions, around 2 billion people don't have access to clean drinking water worldwide. The library will have samples of water from all over the world, as well as books, maps and digital information available to both experts and the public.
We hope, our dream is that this is only the beginning of a network of world water libraries.
Dr. Daniel Maselli says that every small individual action combined makes a huge difference. For EarthX, I'm Sarah Williamson.
Sarah Williamson, thank you. And before we leave you, a new bundle of joy has arrived at a zoo in Greece. Conservationists and wildlife officials are celebrating the birth of a rare and endangered pygmy hippopotamus at the Attica Zoological Park in Athens. Officials say the male calf was born to parents Lizzie and Jamal in mid-February and marks the first birth at the zoo this year. Staffers say a lack of male pygmy hippos in captivity has made breeding harder. So the little one, being a boy, also has the zoo's veterinarian overjoyed. Take a listen.
We're absolutely thrilled, not only because it's a very endangered species, but also because it's a boy. Every captive birth of pygmy hippos is extremely important, and we're very happy to see this baby grow into a healthy adult hippo and hopefully one day reproduce and produce more pygmy hippos.
Zoo officials say the baby boy will stay with his mother, Lizzie, for a few months before being allowed in the zoo's outdoor space. Wildlife officials say pygmy hippos are native to swamps and rainforests in Western Africa. And according to estimates from the International Union for Conservation of Nature, only about 2,000 to 2,500 still live in the wild. And a bizarre sighting in an Oklahoma reservoir got a lot of attention online recently. In a Facebook post that went viral, the state's Department of Wildlife Conservation shared a whole bunch of photos of this mysterious blob dangling from the branches of underwater trees. The jelly-like orb sparked a slew of colorful reactions from social media users, calling the odd-looking spheres, quote, Godzilla eggs, while another one asked, what in the alien invasion is this? The department quickly assured the masses there was nothing to worry about, that the strange orbs are native aquatic microorganisms called bryozoans. They are filter feeders, and while they might not be pretty to look at, they pose no danger to people or wildlife. The department added the organisms help clean the water and serve as prey for mussels, snails, and even small fish. That's it for this edition of EarthX News. Please join us again next week. I'm Christina Thompson.